The morning at the Spencer estate began with an unnatural stillness, the kind that does not soothe but warns, a silence stretched too thin over something waiting to break. The vast rooms, usually defined by power, control, and the unmistakable presence of a man who believed he could bend reality to his will, now felt strangely hollow, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Bill stood near the expansive glass windows, his reflection staring back at him with a rigidity that betrayed nothing and yet concealed everything. He had built his life on certainty, on dominance, on the unwavering belief that no situation could spiral beyond his control. But even before she appeared, something restless had already begun to stir beneath that confidence, something he could not name, something that refused to settle. The sound that shattered that stillness was not loud, but it was sharp enough to fracture the illusion of control in an instant. The front doors opened without ceremony, without hesitation, and Luna stepped inside as if she belonged there, as if she had every right to cross the threshold of a world that had never truly acknowledged her existence. She did not hesitate, did not soften, did not seek permission. In her arms, wrapped tightly in a thin blanket, was a newborn child, fragile and silent in a way that contrasted violently with the storm she carried with her. Her presence did not merely disrupt the space, it redefined it, bending the atmosphere into something tense and volatile. Bill turned, irritation flashing across his face before it hardened into something colder, something more calculating. At first, he saw only the audacity, the intrusion, the challenge to his authority. But then his eyes moved, drawn unwillingly to the child in her arms, and something shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. Luna did not wait for acknowledgement, did not waste time on hesitation. Her voice cut through the room with a calmness that felt almost unnatural, a quiet declaration that carried more weight than any shouted accusation ever could. She stated her claim with a certainty that left no room for negotiation, no space for doubt, as if the truth she carried did not require validation. Bill's reaction was immediate, visceral, and explosive. Denial surged through him, not as a careful defense, but as a forceful rejection of the reality she was attempting to impose. His voice rose, his words sharp, his anger building with each passing second as he dismissed her claim, as he attempted to dismantle it before it could take root. But beneath that anger, beneath the fury that had always been his first line of defense, there was something else, something far more dangerous. Recognition, not of her words, but of the possibility they represented. The child in her arms was not just a disruption. It was a threat to everything he had constructed, everything he had hidden, everything he had refused to confront. The truth did not arrive all at once. It crept in, piece by piece, forming a picture that Bill could not ignore no matter how fiercely he resisted it. The child, the timing, the circumstances that had once seemed distant and irrelevant now aligned with a clarity that made denial feel hollow. But the most devastating realization came not from Luna's words, but from his own memory, from the moments he had dismissed, the decisions he had buried beneath layers of justification. This was not just a claim. It was a consequence. And then came the shift, the moment when anger transformed into something darker, something colder. Bill's fury did not disappear. It evolved. It became focused, deliberate, stripped of its initial chaos and sharpened into intent. He could not allow this truth to exist, not in the open, not where it could unravel everything he had built. The child was not just a complication. It was a liability. Luna was not just a woman making a claim. She was a threat that needed to be neutralized. His gaze hardened as he turned away from her, not in retreat, but in calculation. The decision formed quickly, almost instinctively, as if this was not the first time he had chosen control over consequence. He reached for his phone with a precision that spoke of experience, of a man who had navigated crises before and always found a way to emerge unscathed. When he spoke, his voice was lower, steadier, stripped of the overt anger that had defined him moments before. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, only instruction. Justin listened. The plan unfolded in fragments, each piece designed to eliminate risk, to contain the situation before it could expand beyond control. The accident would be subtle, untraceable, something that could be dismissed as unfortunate but inevitable. Luna would not make it to the hospital. The DNA test would never happen. The truth would never be confirmed. And the child, the most dangerous piece of the entire equation, would be removed from the equation entirely. A quiet arrangement, a discreet transfer, a new identity in a place far removed from the reach of the Spencer name. It was not cruelty in Bill's mind. It was necessity. A solution to a problem that could not be allowed to exist. But even as the plan took shape, even as each detail was carefully constructed, something within him resisted full acceptance of what he was about to do. It was not morality that stopped him, not regret, but something more complicated, something he could not easily define. The child's presence lingered in his mind, not as a threat, but as a question. And questions were dangerous, especially for a man who had built his life on answers. Luna watched him, her expression unchanged, her silence more powerful than any argument she could have made. She did not plead, did not attempt to convince him further. She simply stood there, holding the child, as if she understood exactly what he was capable of, as if she had anticipated this reaction long before she walked through those doors. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet defiance that unsettled him more than any accusation could have. As she left the estate, the air seemed to shift again, the tension following her out, but leaving something behind. Bill remained where he was, his mind already moving ahead, already calculating outcomes, already preparing for the execution of a plan that would erase this moment entirely. But beneath that calculation, beneath the layers of control he had perfected over the years, there was a crack. Small, almost invisible, but present. Liam felt it before he understood it. The change in his father was not dramatic, not something that could be easily identified or explained. It was subtle, woven into the way Bill moved, the way he spoke, the way he avoided certain questions and dismissed others too quickly. It was a shift in energy, a tension that lingered beneath the surface, creating a sense of unease that Liam could not ignore. He had grown up watching his father navigate power and conflict, had learned to recognize the difference between calculated control and something more volatile. And this was not control. This was something else. The first signs appeared at Spencer Publications, in the quiet interactions that others might have overlooked. Justin's behavior had changed, not drastically, but enough to create a pattern that did not sit right. He was more guarded, more deliberate, his movements carrying a sense of urgency that fell out of place. Meetings were cut short, conversations redirected, questions left unanswered. It was not the kind of secrecy that accompanied business strategy. It was something more personal, more urgent. Liam began to watch more closely. At first, it was just observation, a passive attempt to understand what was happening beneath the surface. But the more he watched, the more the pieces began to align into something that felt deeply wrong. Justin's movements, Bill's silence, the subtle but undeniable shift in the atmosphere around them. It all pointed to something being hidden, something significant enough to disrupt the foundation of the Spencer empire. The investigation was not formal, not structured, but it was relentless. Liam followed leads that did not seem like leads, paid attention to details that others dismissed, allowed his instincts to guide him in a way that felt both necessary and dangerous. He did not know what he was looking for, only that he would recognize it when he found it. And when he did, it would change everything. Because beneath the layers of secrecy, beneath the carefully constructed plan designed to bury the truth, there was something that refused to stay hidden. A child, a claim, a decision that would ripple outward, touching lives in ways Bill could not fully predict or control. And at the center of it all was a man who had always believed himself untouchable, now standing on the edge of a reality that threatened to expose not just his actions, but the very core of who he was. The storm had not yet broken, but it was coming. The storm did not arrive with noise or spectacle. It deepened in silence, tightening its grip around every decision already set in motion. What Bill had initiated could no longer be undone, only carried through or catastrophically exposed, and the difference between those two outcomes began to feel thinner with every passing hour. The machinery of his plan had already begun to move, invisible to the outside world but precise in its execution, each step designed to erase, to silence, to ensure that no trace of Luna's claim, or the child she carried, would survive long enough to become truth. Justin operated within that machinery with the efficiency of someone who understood not only what was required, but what was at stake if he failed. He did not question the order, not openly, not in any way that could be traced back to doubt. But there was a hesitation buried deep beneath his discipline, a quiet awareness that this was no longer just another crisis to be managed. This was something darker, something irreversible. He arranged the logistics with care, mapping out Luna's route, identifying the precise moment where control could be seized and reality reshaped into something unrecognizable. The accident would not appear violent, not dramatic, but it would be effective, clean, final. Luna, however, did not move through the world like someone unaware of the danger closing in around her. There was a tension in her stillness, a quiet vigilance that suggested she understood more than she revealed. The child in her arms was not simply a symbol of her claim, but a living anchor that kept her grounded even as everything around her shifted toward uncertainty. She moved toward the hospital not with fear, but with a kind of cold determination, as if she had already accepted the possibility of confrontation, of resistance, of consequences far beyond what anyone else had anticipated. Inside the vehicle transporting her, time stretched in strange, uneven fragments. The city passed by in blurred motion, ordinary life continuing uninterrupted while something far more dangerous unfolded just beneath its surface. The driver remained silent, focused, executing instructions without deviation. Everything appeared controlled, calculated, contained. But control, as Bill would soon discover, is often an illusion that fractures at the moment it is tested most. The impact, when it came, was not explosive but abrupt, a violent interruption that shattered the fragile order of the moment. Metal twisted, glass fractured, and the world lurched into chaos with a force that could not be disguised as coincidence. The collision had been planned, but the outcome was never something that could be perfectly predicted. Luna's body was thrown forward, instinctively shielding the child, even as pain surged through her. The sound of the baby's cry cut through everything, sharp and immediate, a signal that life still held on despite the violence surrounding it. What followed was confusion, noise, movement, people gathering, voices rising, emergency responders arriving with urgency that transformed the scene into something far larger than intended. This was not the quiet, controlled elimination Bill had envisioned. This was exposure. News of the accident spread faster than Justin had anticipated. It reached places it was never meant to reach, carried by witnesses, by reports, by the unpredictable nature of a world that refuses to stay contained. And eventually, it reached Liam. The moment Liam heard, something inside him shifted with a clarity that left no room for doubt. This was it. The pattern he had been tracking, the unease he had been unable to explain, had finally converged into something undeniable. He did not need confirmation to know that this was connected, that this was not random, that somewhere within the carefully guarded actions of his father and Justin lay the truth behind what had just happened. He moved quickly, driven not by certainty, but by instinct, by a need to reach the scene before it could be sanitized, before the truth could be buried beneath layers of explanation and denial. When he arrived, the sight before him was enough to confirm everything he had feared. The wreckage, the presence of emergency personnel, the tension in the air, it all pointed to something deliberate, something orchestrated. And then he saw her. Luna, injured but conscious, clutching the child with a desperation that refused to break even under the weight of what had just happened. There was blood, there was pain, there was fear, but there was also something else. Defiance. Survival. She had not been erased. She had not been silenced. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them that neither could fully articulate. Liam saw not just a victim, but a witness. Someone who carried a truth that others were willing to destroy, to keep hidden. And Luna saw in him something equally important, someone who was beginning to understand. Back at the Spencer estate, the illusion of control began to collapse. Bill received the update not as a report, but as a rupture. The accident had not gone as planned. There were complications, variables he had not accounted for, outcomes he could not fully control. Luna was alive. The child was alive. And worse, the situation had drawn attention. For the first time, the certainty that had defined him faltered. This was the moment where everything could still be salvaged, or where everything could fall apart. The decision he faced now was far more dangerous than the one he had already made, because eliminating Luna had been an act of control. But confronting the consequences of failure required something else entirely. It required him to face the possibility that his actions would not remain hidden, that the truth he had tried to bury might rise with even greater force. And in the distance, moving steadily closer, was Liam.